Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. This is the Trigram Con water. Three heads, Old Yang. Two tails, one head, Yang Yang. Three tails, Old Yin. Our bottom trigram will be read as broken, solid, broken, which again is Con water. Con is deep water, flowing and formless. He is the complement of Li, dark where Li is bright, unconscious to her sharp lucidity, and represents a more fluid, intuitive, and emotional way of perceiving. This is danger, exposure and solitude, and the need to respond with courageous self-reliance when confronted by the haunting unknown. Water is the middle sun, situated in the north, associated with midwinter and midnight. Our top trigram of our primary hexagram or outer trigram will be read as solid, solid, broken. This is dewy, lake, or marsh. Dewy is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share, and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others, and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. Once our changing lines 4 and 6 transform, we will read this as broken, solid, solid. This is Xun, wind or wood. Xun is both wind and living plants. Whatever penetrates, spreads, and grows, shaping itself to the space available or shaping that space to its own nature. She is responsive flexibility, sensitively improvising and adapting. Like the wind, she can always find a way through because she never creates any resistance, and so her influence is subtle and gradual, but far-reaching. In the family of trigrams, Xun is the eldest daughter, gentle and submissive. She belongs to the southeast into late spring and early summer. Dewy lake or marsh above Con water give us a primary hexagram of 47. And once our changing lines change, Xun, wind or wood above Con water give us the supporting hexagram of 59. We'll start by getting the titles to our hexagrams from I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. Hexagram 47. Pardon. I-ming calls exhaustion. Refining body and mind. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 59 is dispersal. Confusion of yin and yang followed by reordering. We will look first of all at our I Ching tarot cards by Kibi and see what images she made for these. 47. Exhaustion. Kibi calls oppression. Slow progress, going through trials, accepting difficulties. Be hindered and encounter difficulties. Even though you know it is a difficult situation, you accept it and stick to your original intention when it's hard to be trusted with words. And our supporting hexagram 59. Dispersal, Kibi calls dissolution. Dissolution, dispersion, reunion. This compares the solution of a difficult problem to the way the wind scatters water. People who share the same aspirations naturally come together by breaking free from collusion and familiarity. It's almost like there's an image of a snake or something on those stairs of that temple. Thank you, Kibi. Next, we will look at everything through the lens of Hilary Barrett. In I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. I highly recommend picking up a copy of this. It's nice and beginner style, but also quite profound. 47. Hilary Barrett calls confined. Key questions. When we approach the I Ching to consult the oracle, the general question we bring to it will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. Key questions. What if you could only rely on yourself? Who are you when you are alone? Confined. Oracle, confined, creating success, constancy of a great person, good fortune, not a mistake. There are words not trusted. The Chinese character for confined or oppressed shows a tree completely encircled by walls, an image of entrapment and isolation. You are cut off and cannot reach out to others. The great person finds good fortune and constancy to an inner ideal. This is the supreme test of character, whether you can hold to your purpose when there is no encouragement, no confirmation from outside, but only your own inner resources. The lack of outward signs of confirmation, the lack of outward signs of progress does not mean that you are wrong or that the world is wrong. Rather than resenting the walls, concentrate on the life and growth within them. Do not place too much value on words. They will not provide you with a way out. Neither conversation, nor argument, nor your own reasoning and theorizing. Words alone are only circulating ideas. They lack the real personal connection that would make them trustworthy. Image, lake without water, confined. A noble one carries out the mandate, fulfills her aspiration. The lake water has all drained away into the stream below, where there might have been a sparkling center of vitality, communication, and exchange. There is no water left, no energy for communication. Even in such straits, a noble one is still active. The lake water drained downward and inward, merging with the stream in a single strong current. In the same way, a noble one lets her mandate, what she is called on to do, flow together with the aspiration of her own heart. The two strengthen one another and create an inner momentum that follows through to fulfillment. Sequence. Being confined follows from hexagram 46, pushing upward. Pushing upward and not reaching an end is naturally confining. You drive yourself upward, full of optimism, confidently expecting to reach your goal, and then you don't. And so you find yourself feeling trapped, exhausted by the climb, and also profoundly shaken and betrayed by the way things have failed to work out as they should. Pair. Confined forms a pair with hexagram 48, the well. The well is wholly connected. Confined means meeting together. By its nature, the well is already limitlessly connected, while the confined tree must reach down towards the water table. Reaching inward, you find help. Outwardly, the oppressive walls are unbroken, but what might the inner space open onto? In our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, 59, Hilary Barrett calls dispersing. Key questions. Where and how can you be less rigid? Where were the walls in this situation, and what can you see as they dissolve away? As energy and vitality is liberated from old boundaries, where will it go? Oracle. Dispersing, creating success. The king assumes his temple, fruitful to cross the great river. Constancy bears fruit. It is as if a great thaw brought the floods, and everything solid were swept away. All the walls, whether they divided, contained, or sheltered, are gone. The familiar landmarks have vanished down the river, and there's a clear view for miles over free-flowing waters. Perhaps this liberates the vital energy of the situation. Perhaps it is utterly disorienting. Definitions, dividing lines, agreements, bonds, established patterns of life and thought, all these can be dispersed, their solidity revealed as an illusion. All that hold things together now, All that holds things together now is the constancy of the flow itself. The king assumes his temple, he draws near and enters it, and takes on his most important role as the people's connection to spirits and ancestors. This can also be an inner process, centering your inner authority in your spiritual home, letting your decisions flow from that essential underlying source. With this reconnection, it becomes possible to cross the great river, which has already come to you. The dissolution of the old forms releases energy into new purpose and direction, staying true to the deep connection through the temple. It's good to make the commitment and venture into the unknown. Image: wind moves above the stream, dispersing. The ancient kings made offerings to the highest to establish the temples. Wind moving above the stream stirs and disperses it as water vapor, reminiscent of the fragrant steam that rises from the offerings and nourishes the spirits. This is the real substance of things, the inner flow of committed offering, the message and influence spreading outward. What is established with offerings will endure, while what is built of rock crumbles away. What are you building on? Sequence: dispersing follows from hexagram 58 opening, rejoicing and hence scattering it, and so dispersing follows. Dispersing means spreading out. Active, joyful communication and exchange naturally loosens things up and tends towards complete dispersing, full visibility with no boundaries, distinctions, or focus. Pair: dispersing forms a pair with hexagram 60, measuring. Dispersing means spreading out. Measuring means stopping. Dispersing has no limits that would stop its flow, yet eventually this liberated energy will flow on into new, more organic forms. Oh, not so fast. We will also look at our changing lines 4 and 6, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements and are the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 4 has the general context, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done. And line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Hexagram 47, confined, changing line 4. Coming slowly, slowly, confined in a bronze chariot, shame, there is completion. A chariot covered in bronze ornamentation is a heavy, lumbering vehicle. It conveys the great importance of the journey and the traveler, but it is not so swift or agile. It makes it difficult to change direction. Such an elaborate approach to meeting with people could be embarrassing. It's open to misinterpretation, especially since it makes it so slow and awkward to respond. You yearn for a simpler way to communicate despite the obstacles, and eventually you manage to make the connection. And changing line 6. Confined by trailing creepers, by unease and discomfort, says acting regret, with regret setting forth good fortune. These creepers appear to block your path, but they could be swept aside. There are no real, substantial reasons not to move on. Instead, there's the feeling of being invalidated and isolated. You lose confidence, and then your own anxious imaginings are your greatest restrictions. You feel unhappy where you are, but convince yourself that any action would make things worse. This is not true. Next, we will look at I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. 47, he calls exhaustion. Exhaustion develops the righteous. Great people are fortunate and blameless. If one complains, one will not be trusted. Exhaustion means reaching an impasse. In the body of the hexagram below is water, in which one yang has fallen in between two yins. Above is lake, in which one yin is on top of two yangs. Both picture mundanity making inroads on the celestial, so that celestial energy does not come through. Therefore, it is called exhaustion. As for the qualities of the hexagram, from the midst of danger, water, it produces joy, lake. Joy comes out of danger. So it also has the sense of resolving exhaustion, resolving an impasse. This hexagram represents polishing and refining body and mind. It follows on the previous hexagram, gathering. Gathering involves attaining joy by accord, whereby one gathers together the medicines, goes back to the fundamental, and returns to the original. But if one can only gather in ease and cannot gather in difficulty, this is still inability to accord, inability to rejoice. People who try to practice the Tao can all keep steadfast when they are in easy circumstances, but many of them waver in determination when they are in difficult or perilous situations. They may change their minds because of the pressures of making a living, or they may slack in determination due to illness. Their spirits may flag because of old age, or they may stop work because of obstruction by some obsession. All these are cases in which people do not exert the mind of Tao and are hindered by exhaustion, so they ultimately do not attain the Tao. If the mind is not exhausted, even though the body be exhausted, the path is not at an impasse, even though the situation presents an impasse, and one can be joyful even when in difficulty. Then there is a developmental aspect within exhaustion. But even though being able to rejoice even in difficulty is something people cannot fully attain, and there will inevitably be a point of exhaustion, nevertheless, if they become exhausted where they should not, they will not attain development. This is because the developmental aspect of exhaustion lies in being correct. Dealing with exhaustion correctly, growing correctly, while exhausted, one goes along in harmony with the time. Going along in harmony with the time is possible only for great people imbued with the quality of correct balance. Great people, while being very wise, appear to be ignorant. While being very skillful, they appear inept. Random thoughts do not occur to them, and they cannot be influenced by circumstances. Their conduct is unaffected, and they are not concerned with externals. Not only do they find good fortune wherever they go, wherever they are, they also accord with the order of life and are blameless. As for those whose main concern is food and clothing, they are untrustworthy in an impasse. They will take trouble in hopes of fortune, but as soon as things don't go their way, they show it in their words and expressions, complaining against heaven and blaming people. So blame goes along with them. How can this bring good fortune? Those who deal with exhaustion and impasse rightly, who are able to be joyful even in difficulty, are great people. Those who are untrustworthy in an impasse, who take trouble only to please themselves, are petty people. It may be the same trouble and the same joy, but the distinction lies in how great people and petty people relate to the trouble and the joy. So those who practice the Tao should by all means maintain rectitude when exhausted and at an impasse. And 59, our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, dispersal. In dispersal, there is development. The king comes to have a shrine. It is beneficial to cross great rivers. It is beneficial to be correct. Explanation. Dispersal means disorganization and disorder. In the body of the hexagram, below is water, in which one yang is hidden between two yins, yang being trapped by yin. Above is wind, in which one yin enters under two yangs, yang being damaged by yin. Yin and yang do not interact. Essence and sense are separated, so it is called dispersal. This hexagram represents yin and yang being lost in confusion, then reordered. It follows on the previous hexagram, wind. Wind involves gradually entering true eternity. Because yin and yang are disordered, one progresses harmoniously to balance them. Once people's yin and yang are disordered and essence and sense have shifted, the mind of Tao is obscured and the human mentality arises. The true sane energy is damaged and the false aberrant energy grows. This is like the one yang in the middle of water, trapped by yin energy. The primordial is concealed inside acquired conditioning. Once the primordial is concealed, its vast energy is inhibited, and yin energy takes over affairs. Insufficient to do good, excessive in doing evil, inevitably leading to total loss of natural innocence. This is like the one yin of wind insidiously rising under pure yang, subtly dispersing yang. This is why dispersal is so called. However, even after dispersal, sages have a way to resolve dispersal, which is able to reorder that which is dispersed. What is the way to resolve dispersal? It is none other than the path of progress through obedience. The only distinction is that if you go one way, obeying invading conditioning, you disperse yang, while if you go the other way, obeying the primordial energy, you foster yang. If you can reverse obedience from acquired conditioning back to the primordial, gradually progressing, without hurrying or lagging, stopping falsehood and preserving truthfulness, mastering yourself and returning to appropriate order, that which is scattered can be assembled. That which is disorderly can be ordered, so that you can return to your original being. First dispersed, ending up not dispersed. There is thus paradoxically a way of development in dispersal. Those who develop this have no danger in their hearts, even when there is danger in events, are not imperiled inwardly, even when there is outward peril. They make use of the path of flexibility to travel the path of firmness, and use positive energy to transmute negative energy. This is like a king coming to have a shrine, using sincerity to summon the spirit, so the spirit can be summoned. It is also like wood following the nature of water, beneficial to cross great rivers, so that danger can be solved. When people's yin and yang are scattered, it is always because of using the human mentality and abandoning the mind of Tao. Every act, every step is on dangerous ground. But if you use the mind of Tao and dismiss the human mentality, you can seek the jewel of life in a tiger's lair, search out the pearl of illumination in a dragon's abyss, progressing harmoniously in danger and getting through danger. With proper control according to events, whether agreeable or disagreeable, the mind of Tao is ever present. The human mentality passes away. The 5 elements aggregate, the 4 signs combine. What dispersal is there? However, in the path of resolving dispersal, there is a process. There is a course of work. There is intensification and relaxation. There is stopping at sufficiency. The slightest deviation and you go far astray. It is only beneficial if you are correct. Accomplishing the work correctly, hastening and relaxing methodically, advancing and withdrawing at the proper times, there will surely be development and benefit. Next, we will read our changing lines 4 and 6, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements and are the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 4 has the general context, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done. And changing line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Primary hexagram 47, Exhaustion. Changing line 4. Coming gradually, exhausted in a golden cart. Shame has an end. Explanation. Leaving the state of danger, water, for the body of joy, lake. This is when exhaustion is to be overcome. But as firmness rests on weakness, one cannot overcome it quickly. It is almost as if weakness is injuring firmness. One comes gradually, as it were, exhausted in a gold cart, and there is shame. However, while one cannot proceed directly on the path, having long been in a state of exhaustion and impasse, if one comes gradually, one will eventually achieve one's aim. This is being exhausted at an impasse, yet gradually overcoming it. And 47, Exhaustion, changing line 6. Exhausted at an impasse, in distress, is called regret over action. There is regret. It is auspicious to go on an expedition. Explanation. Ignorant, lacking knowledge, yet pretending to be brilliant. Indulging in arbitrary guesswork and private speculation. This is like having stopped in an impasse. Trying to figure out the path of sages, believing oneself to have attained reality, one flutters about, suffering damage as time goes on. Unable to advance, yet unable to withdraw, trapped in distress. This is called regret over action. There is regret along with the action. It is better to repent and seek out teachers and helpers, to act only after understanding. Then, though one may have gotten sidetracked at first, and thus reached an impasse and regretted it, after all, one will hear about the great path and go on it to attain happiness. This is experiencing regret and ultimately getting out of an impasse. Among the various kinds of exhaustion and impasses represented by the 6 lines, there is the exhaustion or impasse of great people and the exhaustion or impasse of petty people. That of great people involves being joyful even in trouble, being faithful when exhausted, and ultimately being impeccable. That of petty people is courting danger for their own happiness, not being faithful in hardship and winding up with regret. The way to succeed after hardship is to be able to rejoice even in trouble, to wait for the proper time and persevere, or preserve rectitude. Next, we'll look at our commentary section for each of our hexagrams, which can often be a little bit more alchemically focused. 47 in the commentary, exhaustion, lake above, water below. A lake with no water is exhausted. Therefore, superior people use life to the full and achieve their aim. Exhaustion means coming to an end. Above is lake, below is water. This is the lake leaking, the water flowing away so that there is no water in the lake. This is the image of exhaustion. What superior people see in this is that just as a lake without water is empty, when people lack purpose, their path is at an end. Therefore, they use life to the full to achieve their aim. There is a life that consists of a quantity of energy, and there is a life that consists of meaning of the Tao. The life that is a quantity of energy is created by the universe and is conditioned. The life of meaning of the Tao creates the universe and is primordial. The primordial life is fundamentally something celestial, associated with heaven. Because of mixture with acquired conditioning, it enters the realm of earth and changes into water. This is the one yang in the center of water. Once this celestial yang falls, the jewel of life is hidden and the whole body is completely mundane. There is no exhaustion more exhausting than this. Using life to the full means to get to the end of conditioned life. Achieving one's aim means to achieve the primordial life. Establishing this aim to use life to the full, using life to the full to achieve this aim, while the amount of energy depends on something else, creating life depends on oneself. Using the temporal to restore the primordial, ending false life and establishing real life, producing being in the midst of nothingness, seeking life within death, getting through an exhausting impasse is like a lake without water, again being filled with water. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 59, disintegration. Wind above, water below. Wind blows above water, unintegrated. Thus ancient kings honored God and set up shrines. Disintegration means scattering and confusion. Above is wind, below is water. This is wind blowing above water. The nature of wind is to penetrate, but it cannot get into water. The nature of water is to flow downward, and it does not take in the wind. One another not joining is the image of disintegration. However, even though wind cannot enter water, it can go along with water as it blows. And even though water cannot take in wind, it can rise up along with the blowing of the wind. So there is also the image of resolving disintegration here. What ancient kings saw in this was that people receive their nature and life from heaven and receive their bodies from their parents. Though there may be differences in social status and differences in goodness and evil, insanity and aberration, nevertheless, the source of everyone's endowments is the same. Therefore, the ancient kings honored God and respected heaven and set up shrines to pay respect to their ancestors, so as to cause everyone to know to honor God and respect their ancestors, not forgetting their roots. When the roots are not forgotten, the basis is established and the path develops. Correcting faults and pursuing goodness, manners and morals change, so that what had disintegrated can be reunited. Great indeed was the ancient king's way of resolving disintegration. If practitioners of the Tao can realize the intention of the ancient kings in resolving disintegration, respect heaven and not oppose it, requiet their origins and not forget them, seek life within death, seek blessing within injury, then the four forms can be combined and the five elements can be assembled. This then is the original self, without any disintegration. Next, we will look at James Dekorne's Gnostic Book of Changes, which I've left links to in the description box below. You can download the whole thing as a PDF if you so desire. And it's very handy because it has a bunch of different I Ching commentaries in it, all synthesized into one spot. And James Dekorne sums things up at the end of each hexagram reading. He puts helpful quotes in here by Carl Jung, the Kabbalah, stuff like that. 47, James Dekorne calls oppression. Other titles might be exhaustion, the symbol of repression and confinement, adversity, weariness, confining, entangled, hardship, depression, tiresome restriction, dried up. Quote from D.F. Hook, actions speak louder than words, judgment, leg. Oppression means that successful progress is still possible. The perseverance of the truly great man brings good fortune without error. But if he relies on words, no one will believe them. Wilhelm/Bain's oppression, success, perseverance. The great man brings about good fortune, no blame. When one has something to say, it is not believed. Blofeld, adversity leading to success thanks to persistence in a righteous course. Good fortune for the truly great and freedom from error. Though words be spoken, they will not inspire confidence. Great refers to high moral qualities. This hexagram is of evil omen for most people, but success can be won through tremendous persistence in doing what is right. Lu, oppression, success, persistence, good fortune for the great man, no blame. If one indicates with words only, no one will believe. Ritzema/Karcher, confining, growing, trial, great people significant, without fault, possessing words not trustworthy. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of restriction and distress. It emphasizes that turning inward through accepting enclosure is the adequate way to handle it. Wu, hardship indicates pervasion and perseverance. There will be good fortune for the great men. No error, but their words do not make impressions on people. The image, leg. An abyss beneath the marsh that drains its water, the image of oppression. Thus the superior man will sacrifice his life to attain his purpose. Wilhelm/Bain's there is no water in the lake, the image of exhaustion. Thus the superior man stakes his life on following his will. Blofeld, this hexagram symbolizes a marsh in which no water appears. The superior man risks his life to carry out his will. Ritzema/Karcher, marsh without stream, confining. A Chunsu, or chief son or superior person, it uses involving fate to release purpose. Cleary 2, developed people accomplish their will by living out their destiny. Developed people only live out their destiny. They do not willingly try to avoid following and accepting it. Being strong and balanced, they are able to be joyful even in danger. This is the will that is up to oneself. Developed people intend to accomplish their will and do not vacillate just because they run into problems. Wu, the marsh has no water. This is hardship. Thus the Chunsi, or chief son or superior person, is prepared to dedicate his life to fulfill his commitments. A marsh devoid of water is like a man deprived of his intellectual pursuits. This is unacceptable to a Chunsi. He would rather fight to the end than surrender to idiocy. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. In oppression, we see the dynamic lines covered and obscured by the magnetic. We see the attribute of perillousness in the lower trigram going on to cheerfulness in the upper. Who but the superior man is still able to advance through straightened Who but the superior man is still able to advance, although straightened by circumstances? The central position of the dynamic lines explains the good fortune of the great man who is firm and correct. As regards speech-making, to be fond of argument or persuasion is the way to be reduced to extremity. Leg. The written Chinese character of oppression presents us with the picture of a tree within an enclosure. A plant, according to Williams, fading for want of room. A tree, according to Tai Tung, not allowed to spread its branches. The image conveys the idea of being straitened and distressed, and the hexagram indicates how skillful management may relieve it. The two central places in the figure are occupied by dynamic lines, but line 2 is confined between 1 and 3, which are magnetic, and line 5, the ruler, as well as 4, his minister, are covered by the magnetic 6th line. These conditions indicate the repression of good men by adversity. The Konghasi editors imply that actions and not words are what are required in the case. Perilousness is the attribute of the lower trigram, and cheerfulness that of the upper. The superior man, no matter how straitened, remains master of himself and pursues his principled intent. The idea of speech-making is found in the upper trigram, one of the attributes of which is the mouth, or speech, as well as pleased satisfaction. The pleading of the oppressed party still tries to make others pleased with him. Literally translated, the first sentence of the image reads, "A marsh with no water is oppression." Chu Hsi says, "The water descending and leaking away, the marsh above will become dry." Anthony, our belief in the ruling power as beneficial is shaken by doubt. This lack of steadfastness is a problem because it obstructs acceptance and its corrective power. We often receive this hexagram when we feel tired. The oppressiveness of doubt exhausts our inner resources. Notes and paraphrases, judgment. With enough will, success can be won. Actions speak louder than words, i.e., the answer lies beyond the realm of reason and logic. Intuition furthers. The superior man stakes everything he's got on his will to succeed. In oppression, we have the image of a dry lake bed. Anyone who has ever seen alkali flats in the desert can easily understand this metaphor for oppression. Almost nothing can live in such an environment. The following hexagram, the well, is an upside-down image of oppression, depicting the opposite case of an unending source of nourishment flowing from deep beneath the surface of the earth. A comparison of these two figures will reveal a great deal about the meaning of each. To be under oppression, then, is to be cut off from all sustenance. Although there is water down below, it is presently inaccessible, and there is no nourishing flow of inner forces to the surface. This is a common, inevitable, and potentially defeating experience for anyone doing serious inner work. A quote from Thomas Cleary in the Taoist teaching. People who try to practice the Tao can all keep steadfast when they are in easy circumstances, but many of them waver in determination when they are in difficult or perilous situations. They may change their minds because of the pressures of making a living, or they may slacken determination due to illness. Their spirits may flag because of old age, or they may stop work because of obstruction by some obsession. All these are cases in which people do not exert the mind of Tao and are hindered by exhaustion, so they ultimately do not attain the Tao. Obviously, this is a dangerous situation, and we are told how to cope with it in the Confucian commentary, where it is observed that the lower trigram of peril goes on to the upper trigram of cheerfulness. These two trigrams are found in reversed sequence in hexagram number 60, Restrictive Regulations, where a cheerful attitude is described as absolutely essential for the furtherance of the work. The observations made there also apply here, and we see the superior man thereby enabled to advance under conditions that would utterly defeat lesser individuals. This cheerfulness cannot be underestimated. When it comes naturally and isn't forced, it is a gift of grace. Suddenly, one is enabled to face the most incredible hardships with a light heart. It isn't that you no longer care. You still do the best you can to further the work, but you do it with bemused detachment. A quote from C. Ponce in the Kabbalah. The one thing the Jewish mystics never lost sight of was the suffering experienced in the arena of the profane. They did not retreat from this suffering, but sought instead to find meaning in it by living it. This is the core of mysticism. The temple in which the sacred marriage takes place is the world. Lines 2 and 5 specifically mention sacrifice, an important concept in the I Ching. Sacrifice is mentioned in lines 17:6, 45:2, 46:2, 46:4, 47:2, 47:5, and 63:5, and in the judgment of hexagram 20. Note that in each case, sincerity is specifically cited as essential to success. Sincere, 1, marked by genuineness, as a free of dissimulation, not hypocritical, real, true, honest. Very often, the sincerity of our sacrifices involves following the dictates of the work, whether we fully understand them or not. Much that takes place in the work is incomprehensible to ego consciousness. For example, changes often occur within the psyche which we only experience as strange dreams. Yet somehow, perhaps months later, we suddenly realize that we no longer act in a certain way or have lost interest in something that used to be of compelling importance. Our sacrifices are necessary for these changes to take place, even if they don't immediately make sense to us. A quote from the Bhagavad Gita: "With sacrifice shall you nourish the gods, and may the gods nourish you. Thus nourishing one another, you will obtain the highest good. The gods nourished by sacrifice will bestow on you the enjoyments you desire. He is verily a thief who enjoys the things that they give without offering to them anything in return." Each of Cleary's Taoist 1 and Buddhist 2 commentaries provides valuable insights into how much courage is required to follow the dictates of the work at its more advanced levels. Take comfort that others before you have persevered and survived. Developed people accomplish their will by living out their destiny. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 59, expansion or dispersion. Other titles might be dissolution, disintegration, dispersal, overcoming dissension, scattering, dispersing, unintegrated, reuniting, evaporation, reorganization, New Deal, reshuffle, course correction, catharsis, judgment, leg. Expansion intimates that there will be progress and success. The king goes to his ancestral temple. It will be advantageous to cross the great stream. It will be advantageous to be firm and correct. Blowfold, scattering, success. The king has approached his temple, an omen of safety. It is advantageous to cross the great river or sea, i.e. to go on a long journey. Persistence in a righteous course brings reward. Ritsama/Karcher, dispersing, growing. The king imagines possessing a temple, harvesting, wading the great river, harvesting, trial. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of confronting obstacles, illusions, and misunderstandings. It emphasizes that clearing away what is blocking the light is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to disperse what obstructs awareness. The image, leg. The image of wind moving over water forms expansion. The ancient kings, in accordance with this, presented offerings to God and established the ancestral temple. Wilhelm/Baines, the wind drives over the water, the image of dispersion. Thus the kings of old sacrificed to the Lord and built temples. Blowfold. This hexagram symbolizes wind blowing across the face of the waters. The kings of old built temples in which to sacrifice to the supreme Lord of heaven. A temple is a place of safety from the ills of the world. The symbolism here is that the upper trigram forms a template in which people are safe from the pit, the lower trigram. Its middle line, 5, signifies the king. The implication is that we should employ spiritual or moral means to preserve ourselves from the danger threatened by the lower trigram. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. The dynamic line is central in the lower trigram, and the magnetic 4th line is correct in the upper trigram, uniting with the dynamic ruler above her. The king's mind is without any deflection as he goes to his ancestral temple. He rides over water in a vessel of wood and will cross the great stream with success. Leg. The hexagram of expansion denotes a state of dissipation or dispersion. It shows men's minds alienated from correctness and sure to go on to disorder. Here, an attempt is made to show how the situation should be remedied. The lower trigram represents water and the upper wind. Wind moving over water evaporates it and suggests the idea of dispersion. Success is intimated because there are dynamic lines occupying the central places in the trigrams. The king's piety moves the spirits by its sincerity. When the religious spirit rules men's minds, there will be no alienation from what is right and good. Under such conditions, even hazardous enterprises may be undertaken. The second sentence of the Confucian commentary literally begins, "The king is indeed in the middle." This means that his heart and mind are set on the central truth of what is right and good. The ancestral temple signifies the recognition that sincere religious practices counteracted the tendency to mutual alienation and selfishness among men. The wooden vessel refers to one of the attributes of the upper trigram, which is wood. It suggests a boat riding on water, the lower trigram, hence crossing the great water. Notes and paraphrases, judgment. Focus on the ideals of the work and maintain your will. A major synthesis is possible. The superior man subdues his ego to attain his latent potential. Because of the intimate relationship between this figure and hexagram number 45, contraction, I have chosen the title of expansion to best emphasize their polarity. The ancient kings and sages are more mythical than historical, so we can assume that they symbolize archetypal forces, gods within the psyche, of whom the ego is only the current space-time representative, i.e. servant, facilitator. The self is the focal point, the center of this multidimensional awareness complex. A quote from R. Fisher in A Cartography of the Ecstatic and Meditative States in, looks like a magazine, Science, page 174 in 1971. In both timeless and spaceless experiences, the mundane world is virtually excluded. Of course, the converse is true of the mundane state of daily routine, in which the oceanic unity with the universe in ecstasy and samadhi is virtually absent. Thus, the mutual exclusiveness of the normal and the exalted states, both ecstasy and samadhi, allows us to postulate that man, the self-referential system, exists on two levels, as self in the mental dimension of exalted states, and as I in the objective world, where he is able and willing to change the physical dimension out there. The symbol of a temple where one worships one's ancestors may be taken as the perfect gestalt of the work as it exists outside of space-time, as well as the karmic repository of all previous incarnations. It represents both the completed work and the work in progress. That the family temple was regarded in China as symbolic of an ideal standard of perfection such as this is implied in the following passage, a quote from H.G. Creel and Confucius on the Chinese Way. Diplomatic negotiations were carried on in the ancestral temple, in the veritable presence, it was believed, of the ancestors. Diplomatic banquets were given there also. Even a proposal of marriage was received by the father of the prospective bride in his ancestral temple, in the presence of the spirits. The world of Confucius, what we must remember, was one in which there was a nearly complete breakdown of moral standards. Only in the performance of religious ceremonies could there still be found, consistently, a type of conduct regulated by a socially accepted norm of behavior, in which men's actions were motivated by a pattern of cooperative action, rather than swayed by the greed and passions of the moment. Psychologically, expansion depicts a state of inner pressure capable of fruitful resolution if it can be properly guided. The king in the image, in this case the ego, sacrifices for a high ideal, the good of the work. Legg's commentary tells us that the second sentence of the Confucian commentary literally begins, "The king is indeed in the middle." This suggests a combination of his second and third sentences into the paraphrase, "The king steers a middle course when crossing the water to the ancestral temple." This gives the image of a vessel and the proper way to guide it toward a destination. Anyone who has ever steered a boat with a rudder knows that to overcorrect on either side is a mark of poor seamanship. The goal is to maintain a dynamic balance in our guidance of the work. Lines 2 and 5 represent proper course correction because they are both in the middle of their respective trigrams. Expansion is the inverse of the following hexagram of restrictive regulations. What is there confined and hoarded is here dispensed. But this dispensation must conform with the ultimate good of the work. Not just any release of tension will do. It must recombine itself into a new and better organization, as imaged in the fourth line. If this new order is a proper one, the released tension precipitates a catharsis, as imagined in line 5. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. The form, then, in which our complexes confront us is the form in which the fundamental materials of our human structure come into our here and now existence. Like crystals, they are always imperfect to some extent, and often unrecognizable or grossly disfigured in comparison with the ideal shape, the shape that would represent the pure incorporation of the crystal scheme. But we have to meet them in this more or less imperfect or distorted form, and out of this form we have to transform them into something that may be more akin to the aboriginal intent inherent in their archetypal cores. This undertaking, this process, is what Jung calls individuation. Suggestions for meditation. The judgment of hexagram number 45, contraction, also mentions the king going to his ancestral temple. A close comparison of this figure with expansion will reveal much about the dynamics of the work. Next, we will read our changing lines 4 and 6, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements and are the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 4 as the general context, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done. And changing line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Changing line 4 of our primary hexagram 47, oppression. Leg. The fourth line dynamic shows its subject proceeding very slowly to help the subject of the first line, who is straightened by the carriage adorned with metal in front of him. There will be occasion for regret, but the end will be good. Wilhelm/Baines. He comes very quickly, oppressed in a golden carriage. Humiliation, but the end is reached. Blofeld. A slow arrival. Trouble in a golden carriage. Shame, but not for long. Trouble in a golden carriage coupled with shame suggests that we get into difficulty through our presumption or through placing too much confidence in someone of much higher station than ourselves. Liu. He comes slowly, oppressed in a golden carriage. Embarrassment, but good results in the end. Ritzema/Karcher. Coming, ambling, confined, tending towards a metallic chariot, abashment, possessing completion. Slofnessy. Coming slowly, entangled in the metal chariot. Distress, there is an end. Clary 1. Coming gradually, exhausted in a golden cart. Shame has an end. Clary 2. Coming slowly, exhausted in a golden car. There is shame, but there is a conclusion. Wu. Walking slowly and leisurely, he is distressed in seeing a golden carriage and feels humiliated, but he will complete his assignments. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. His aim is directed to help the lower line. Although he is not in his appropriate place, he and his correlate will in the end be together. Wilhelm/Baines. His will is directed downward. Though the place is not appropriate, he nevertheless has companions. Blofeld. The tardy arrival implies that our willpower is at a low ebb. However, though the line is not suitably placed, it does not stand alone. At least we may hope for a little aid from others. Ritzema/Karcher. Purpose located below indeed, although not an appropriate situation, possessing associating indeed. Clary 2. The mind is on something lower, there is a partner. Wu. He wishes to be with the one below. He is responsive to the others. Leg. Lines 4 and 1 are proper correlates, but 4 is dynamic in a magnetic place and therefore slow to give assistance. Then line 1 is run over by line 2, which is represented as a chariot of metal. It is difficult for 1 and 4 to come together and affect much, but 4 is near the ruler, also dynamic, and through this common sympathy, a measure of success is attained. Notes and paraphrases. Sue. The man in a high position proceeds hesitantly to help the lower class. He encounters difficulty in breaking loose from the circle of the wealthy and the powerful. The original intention of his good resolution eventually brings favorable results. Wing. Your progress is slowed by your position in the situation. Although your intentions are good, you are diverted from your path by temptations. There is some humiliation, but you will accomplish your aim. Editor. Most translations render this line as a golden carriage, a luxurious vehicle, slowly transporting the subject of the fourth line to his destination. The implication is that our unhurried progress may be due to self-indulgence, but the position is not totally improper, and a delayed relief of oppression is assured. A quote from Jung in Civilization in Transition: "In each of us there is another whom we do not know. He speaks to us in dreams and tells us how differently he sees us from the way we see ourselves. When, therefore, we find ourselves in a difficult situation to which there is no solution, he can sometimes kindle a light that radically alters our attitude, the very attitude that led us into the difficult situation." James Dekorne breaks changing line 4 down into two possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, resolution of the situation is slow in coming, better late than never. And B, illusions of ease and pleasure retard our progress. Nevertheless, mediocre performance does not necessarily portend failure. And changing line 6. Leg. The sixth line magnetic shows its subject straightened as if bound with creepers, or in a high and dangerous position, and saying to herself, "If I move, I shall repent it." If she does repent of former errors, there will be good fortune in her going forward. Wilhelm/Baines, he is oppressed by creeping vines. He moves uncertainly and says, "Movement brings remorse." If one feels remorse over this and makes a start, good fortune comes. A man is oppressed by bonds that can easily be broken. The distress is drawing to an end. But he is still irresolute. He is still influenced by the previous conditions and fears that he may have cause for regret if he makes a move. But as soon as he grasps the situation, changes his mental attitude, and makes a firm decision, he masters oppression. Blofeld, entangled with creepers and tottering uneasily, he voices regret for his actions. Provided regret is felt, to advance will bring good fortune. We shall certainly suffer, but sincere regret will stand us in good stead. Lu, oppressed by vines, he moves uneasily and says, "Movement brings regret." If he feels regret, then sets forth good fortune. Ritsumas/Karcher, confined, tending towards trailing creepers, tending towards the unsteady and unsettled. Spoken thus, stirring up repenting possesses repenting. Chastising significant. Slofnacy, entangled in the creeping vines and the doubled rafters. Say, regretting the level, there is regret. Determination is auspicious. Cleary 2, exhausted in difficulty, in distress. Thinking there will be regret if one acts, one does not regret. Going forth leads to good fortune. At the extreme of exhaustion, one should go on actively. If one is negative, weak, and feeble in ability, one doubts whether one's ideas are right. This is like being tangled up and ill at ease. Fearing that if one acts, one will regret it, one always shrinks back regrettably. Therefore, sages go directly forth to good fortune, resolving this. Wu, he is surrounded by tangling vines and besieged with weariness. He says to himself, "If I would be regretful for doing nothing or doing something, I might as well do something to take my chances of getting out of hardship." Commentary, Confucius/Leg. Her spirit and action are unsuitable, but she repents of her former errors and goes on to good fortune. Wilhelm/Baines, he is not yet suitable. If there is remorse, this is an auspicious change. Blofeld, the entangling creepers are indicated by the unsuitable position of this line. Feeling regret is a means to obtain good fortune. Ritsumas/Karcher, not yet appropriate indeed. Significance moving indeed. Cleary 2, one has not hit the mark. There is regret because of regretting action. Good fortune is to go. Wu, he is not responsive. This would be a good move. Leg, line 6 is at the top of the figure where the distress may be supposed to reach its height. He appears bound and on a perilous summit, but her extremity is also her opportunity. She is moved to think of repenting, and if she does so and goes forward, all will be fortunate. Notes and paraphrases. Sue, the man appears to be in the depths of distress, His fears and his irresolute concerns over previous failures are not conducive to progress, but the oppressive bonds can be broken if he repents of his error and grasps the situation firmly. Wing, do not allow difficulties in the recent past to create in your attitudes about the future. If you have become cynical or opinionated, you are lost. Improve your attitude and the situation will follow. Good fortune. Editor. The dominant idea is that the subject of the sixth line at the top is fettered only by vegetation which presumably could be cast off with little trouble. This might suggest a long-standing dilemma or limiting belief. Vines and creepers only entangle those who are not active enough to get out of their way. It follows that only the illusion that they can't be cast off prevents liberation. A quote from E.C. Whitmont, Return of the Goddess, in Return of the Goddess. Our common reaction to painful difficulty, consciously or unconsciously, is, what have I done to deserve this? How can I get out of this? How can there be a God if this is allowed to happen? Rarely do we ask, what new dimension of experiencing does this try to teach me? Wherein am I being challenged? James Dekorne breaks changing line 6 down into one possible succinct definition. A. Conquer your illusions and proceed with the work. Next, we will get a randomly card-drawn verse from the Tao Te Ching while we sum the reading up. Primary hexagram was 47 exhaustion, which shows a tree confined by walls, and it's reaching down towards the water table to try to find inner reserves of strength and a feeling of that power or connection to the source. In our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 59, dispersal. All of the boundaries have been flooded and washed away. So the walls that contained this tree and the walls that also did beneficial things are washed away. So there's the need to reorder things. And it says great indeed is the potential in a time of dispersal. So we could go right back to the way things were and say that because walls, we remember them being here, surrounding this tree, confining us from our source. Why don't we just build where we remember them being? But we have also the potential to have things be reoriented in a way that matches nature a little bit better or matches the flow of the Tao. Our changing lines 4 and 6, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Changing line 4 has line 4 trying to help line 1. And it seems like line 2 is in this golden chariot and runs over line 1. And changing, and then line 4 trying to help line 1. At first, it's not helpful, but there will be a benefit, or how is it worded? Let me grab out James Dekorne once again here for that. Notes and paraphrases. So, the man in a high position proceeds hesitantly to help the lower class. He encounters difficulty in breaking loose from the circle of the wealthy and the powerful. The original intention of his good resolution eventually brings favorable results. James Dekorne breaks changing line 4 into two possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, resolution of the situation is slow in coming, better late than never. And B, illusions of ease and pleasure retard your progress. Nevertheless, mediocre performance does not necessarily portend failure. And then changing line 6 shows someone wrapped around by creeping vines, and it has the idea that they are nervous about trying to move forward because of remembering old failures. But let's see here. At the extreme of exhaustion, one should go on actively. If one is negative, weak, and feeble in ability, one doubts whether one's ideas are right. This is like being tangled up and ill at ease, fearing that if one acts, one will regret it. One always shrinks back, regrettably. Therefore, sages go directly forth to good fortune, resolving this. This person is wrapped up in vines, indicating that they've been still for a long period of time. Vines are something that would be easy to rip through, but it's almost as though the perspective of being wrapped up and our past failures are potentially going to hinder our progress. So the idea is to just move forward regardless of our sense of being constrained. The dominant idea is that the subject of the sixth line at the top is fettered only by vegetation, which presumably could be cast off with little trouble. This might suggest a long-standing dilemma or limiting belief. Vines and creepers only entangle those who are not active enough to get out of their way. It follows that only the illusion that they can't be cast off prevents liberation. And then a quote from E.C. Whitmont in Return of the Goddess. Our common reaction to painful difficulty, consciously or unconsciously, is, what have I done to deserve this? How can I get out of this? How can there be a God if this is allowed to happen? Rarely do we ask, what new dimension of experiencing does this try to teach me? Wherein am I being challenged? James Dekorne breaks changing line 6 down into one possible succinct definition. Conquer your illusions and proceed with the work. With the focus being on someone helping those below them, even though it's like they've been run over by a golden chariot, like the wealthy are ruining things, essentially, and ruining a certain progress for all involved. Still, there may be shame, but in the end, if we continue and don't be restrained by our own perspective of our limitations, then we're going to have success. And we can also learn something and have a perspective change about maybe where we think we're so incredibly limited, but it may just be that we view ourselves as limited, not that we actually are, at least in an ultimate sense. I find it interesting that there's walls in both of the hexagrams. There's the wall surrounding the tree, cutting it off from its source of nourishment. Makes me think of like a bonsai tree. And sometimes the difficulties around us can make us stronger. If we're used to being cut off from nutrients, we have a way of getting through the world that often can take advantage of as many abilities to access nourishment as possible. They may not always be the best sources, but the idea that we're actively trying to find nourishment, regardless of it seeming like we won't be able to, having the ability to do that when there is nourishment that can be found, things can go a lot more smoothly. And it's almost like having I don't know, we're talking about vines and trees and stuff, so if you set up a maze with something beneficial for the nutrients of a tree at the center of the maze, and you had these vines, they eventually would probably work their way into that space. But also being formed by life in such a way where we have to really go through all these ins and outs of a maze to get to nourishment, it can often feel like we can't just move freely, and that we're so confined that we have this perspective that confines us as well. That even when those things are not there, it's like we're so used to doing this kind of motion to get to what we need that we think that that's always necessary. And so in that changing line 6, being wrapped up by vines, it's something that we can change our perspective on, and that will do us a lot of good. We shouldn't allow life to bind us and make us feel like we cannot access what we need. We need to break through the illusions and continue the work. And I guess first of all, it would be good to focus on ourselves in that and make sure that we're progressing the work internally. And then once that's done, like in changing line 4, we can lend help to those that need it, that are being run over by golden chariots. And the idea in this case of the wealthy just running over everybody thinking that they're non-people, that attitude should change, and that those that are cut off from nutrients can once again access them. This flood knocking down all the walls also means that the walls between us and each other can be seen through a little bit better. With core of Black Raven meditation, right before this reading, just last night, I met with her and we kind of did an interview on each other. But the reading that she got was Hexagram 38, which had to do with things at odds, but there was still going to be benefit. And it was like, the question was, if you can't see eye to eye, what can you see? And that's, I think, really, really profound, even in regards to this reading, that those walls that keep us from being able to see eye to eye, they may not be walls, and they may be on their way down. And it's up to us, each one of us, to transform our perspective of the situation and to see through entanglements that are mostly illusory in order to both help ourselves further the work and get over this sort of woe is me, I'm confined and restricted, and there's no way for me to access nourishment, let alone nourish others, to more of a position of regardless, I'm going to tear through whatever holds me, especially if it's only vegetation and it just indicates that I've been sitting in one position for far too long, kind of believing that this false confinement is a true confinement. But even the walls around this tree, confining it from its nutrients in dispersal, are being swept away. So now would be the time to make sure that we're looking clearly at the situation, and regardless if it feels like we are constrained, if we just get up and move, we might find that the constraints are vegetation, that they come off fairly easily, and that once we get that move going, we can create some self-development and some momentum. and then hopefully be able to help one another where each of us needs help. This kind of perspective that there's an in-group and an out-group, and that the wealthy know more or are more advanced than others, can be something that is fostered not only by the wealthy, but by the people that they're being ruled over, that are, by the wealthy. So maybe the flash of the golden carriage or the golden chariot is so much that it just makes people feel like they are lesser in some way. But imposter syndrome happens to everyone, not just people that don't have golden carriages or golden chariots. And we're all people. We all, presumably developed from lesser organisms and life forms to the point that we are at now. And if we can see through some of the facades and illusions of the things that separate us from them, or that us versus them thing, maybe some good can come out of a bunch of walls being torn down. Maybe we need to be very, very, very careful and intentional about how we allow those walls to be rebuilt and where. Our cooperation is needed in creating new boundaries and forming new walls. And if we just allow it to go willy-nilly, or like it's gone before in the past, and don't see that now is an auspicious time to reform our conclusions about what confines us and what separates us from others, we might find that there can be greater or better categories made that confine people less and allow nourishment to flow to all of the different trees that are being surrounded by walls. It doesn't help us to confine others. It doesn't. It's self-limiting, if you talk about the capitalized self. It's like, psychologically speaking, if you were to go in and have some sort of issue psychologically, and they encouraged you to further disassociate with all of your different elements in your psyche, where that can't be helpful. Obviously, sometimes it may feel that certain areas are dangerous, but with the walls all being crumbled down, we might be able to see through that a little bit and realize that maybe the reasons that our walls are there in part is not only because of external factors, but also potentially we've just accepted them for what they are, or at face value, without attempting to get up out of this position of just being still and allowing the vines to grow around us and actually try and move forward, especially now that walls are crumbling or being washed completely away. Now would be the time to get out of those vines and move and create better, more inclusive, more wholesome forms of boundaries and walls. And hopefully that isn't the wealthy versus the poor. Because there's a lot more poor than there are wealthy. And there should be that concern, like in line 4 for line 1, to help the line below. And not allow the line to just be run over by golden chariots. We will read from the Tao Te Ching, verse 41. My copy is by Jia Fu Fang and Jane English. Oh, turned right to it. The wise student hears of the Tao and practices it diligently. The average student hears of the Tao and gives it thought now and again. The foolish student hears of the Tao and laughs aloud. If there were no laughter, the Tao would not be what it is. Hence it is said, the bright path seems dim. Going forward seems like retreat. The easy way seems hard. The highest virtue seems empty. Great purity seems sullied. A wealth of virtue seems inadequate. The strength of virtue seems frail. Real virtue seems unreal. The perfect square has no corners. Great talents ripen late. The highest notes are hard to hear. The greatest form has no shape. The Tao is hidden and without name. The Tao alone nourishes and brings everything to fulfillment.
Huh?